crazy. I'm ready for this to be over.
Well, given that it's been so mismanaged,
Mhm.
um, I used to tell my management students sometimes you have to halt everything and start from the beginning to get where you should be right now.
Right,
Yeah,
right,
and I think
right.
that that's the case with this because um, I mean, my daughter was in China when it broke out
Oh,
last December, I think.
okay. Uh-huh.
And she was reporting in some of the very poor towns, in
Oh,
the very, very poor areas where people depended on small farms, et cetera, et cetera. They were
right.
nailing the doors so that people couldn't get out.
Oh my God.
They were going door to door.
That is crazy.
No, and I thought it was crazy when I heard it,
Right.
but now I'm thinking this is how they harnessed it. That is how they harnessed it so well. And in some of the smaller cities, particularly in the manufacturing areas,
Right.
what they did was they had worker people who were going around, educators,
Uh-huh.
helping people understand why they needed to stay
Okay. Right.
in the poor areas. They didn't care to just nail the people in the house.
Okay. So, and I think part of the problem here in this country is that um we push this hegemonic doctrine that you is the individual who pulls himself up from his bootstraps, right? And we don't need government, we don't need this, and so therefore we don't take in consideration there are things that we need to do for the common good,
Yeah.
and so that's why people don't want to wear masks. I think it's supposed to be their individual. Hi.
Venita.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Hi.
Good. How are
Good
you?
to see you.
Well, I didn't finish my reading, but I will be here to keep the time for you all tonight.
Okay.
It's very
Okay.
easy reading. It's almost like during the discussion, you might be able to read along because I've tabbed some the pages. Hey,
Oh, good.
Leonie.
Hey,
Hello.
Hi.
Leonie.
Hi,
Hi.
everybody.
Hi.
Leonie, I'm going to try to make you a co-host, okay?
Okay.
Yeah, in case, I get screwed up, as
Okay.
tends to be the case.
You're not
uh,
recording? You're not recording yet, though.
okay, let me start that. Uh, okay, so we are actually live now and recording. And Leonie, make co-host. Yes. Okay. Yeah, because what's been happening, that's what I was saying about, it seems to be using a lot of bandwidth, or I don't know what's going on, but I tend to get knocked off of my Wi-Fi at least once during the meeting. I will always fight to come back, but that's why I always want to have somebody as the alternate co-host. And Leonie is a Zoom expert.
No,
Does anybody else know Zoom? Karen, do you use it? Do you know it?
I use it, but I'm not tech savvy.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've been doing community meetings and forums and stuff.
Okay. Okay. Good to know.
Stuff.
Okay. Here's Gio. Okay.
And we're missing Kim.
We're missing Kim and Nicole, but we can go ahead and get started.
Hey, Gio.
Hey, ladies, how
Hey,
you doing?
Gio.
Hey.
I missed you Saturday.
Oh, I had some stuff going on.
we had some stuff going on too.
I bet you did.
Oh, Nicole is here.
Okay, cool.
Yay.
Oh, we have a full house
We
today.
have a full house. We haven't had Nicole in a couple of weeks. We haven't had BJ in a couple of weeks.
And I apologize. I'm this COVID pandemic thing is causing me to have some chronic and severe sleeping problems.
Yeah.
Oh.
And it's not like I'm sleeping in the day, but it is definitely, I'm going to bed at 4:30, 5:30.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but it's getting better.
Okay.
Good.
It's getting better.
Can you lower your camera a little bit, BJ? We're not seeing your mouth at all.
Okay.
Okay,
Oh,
good.
yeah, much better.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can get started. Kim may come, and we also may get a visit from the guy that I call my son, Koketso, who lives in Johannesburg. So it's late at night there for him,
Mhm.
but he has wanted to be a part of these discussions, so he may show up. BJ, you all may not know, but BJ is the one I call sister wife. I have all these relationships with my online friends, and BJ is sister wife. So one day we have to have that conversation, BJ.
People always go, "Waha, okay."
So you want to get us started, BJ?
Okay, and thank you for inviting me and allowing me to moderate our discussion tonight. But before we begin with the chapters that I have been assigned, I need to know two things. Did everybody get my summary and the questions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other is to go back, and Geo can really help to look at some of the ideas and some of the commentary from last week, because the book really provides a continuum for thoughts that string this whole idea of constructing both the history, the notion, and the historical experiences of the theme of the book, which is caste. So I went back because I wasn't here last week, and looked at some of the things that were suggested as part of the discussion, and looking at the human impulse to create hierarchies, achieving egalitarianism, and the invisibility of caste, which I think is extremely important for people to understand the pillars of the caste system as Wilkerson presents them. But I think it's also important for us to be able to, in reading any book, especially one that is so essential and so complex as this one, is to recognize our own internal familiarity, our own our personal understanding. And I'm one of those people, whether I'm reading Morrison or Butler or Wilkerson, I tend to have so many triggers that I have to stop, reset myself, and then begin to understand what those triggers are about, and whether or not it's irrelevant to the character that has triggered me, or the topic that has triggered me. So I want to go, before we begin to look at these 3 chapters, which I think happens to be as a gardener, I would say it happens to be the gravel that you put underneath the the soil, that does the draining, that maintains that water balance that's necessary for a plant not to die. So I want to go around and ask if you had any triggers, if you had any expectations in this particular chapter that you found that pressed down on you, that caused you to exceedingly to go into your own life and find something. So what were your emotional responses to reading this? So why don't we start? Yeah.
BJ, could we do our introduction so we are sure to get that on the recording before we start the triggers?
Well, people can introduce themselves and then trigger. I mean,
okay, that's fine.
Okay, I don't want. I made the essence of it so wide so that even people who didn't read the chapters, you can look at the topics and you can look at the table of contents and get a sense. So, Michelle, you want to start?
Sure. So I'm Logan Michelle Odom. I'm located in Brooklyn, New York. This is my entrance fee. We're reading Caste, The Origins of Our Discontents by Isabel Wilkerson. And you can learn more about the Global Black Feminist Reading Circle on Facebook, and our videos are on YouTube. As far as triggers, the story about the young man who liked the little white girl, and he sent her a Christmas card or something and signed it, L with love. And ultimately that led to his death. And that was a hard one for me, because it was just his attraction was just such a human, natural thing to me. And children don't know about all of the issues that adults have concocted. They just come from a genuine place. And so that we have had to learn to repress those emotions in order to survive. And of course, he did not survive because he had not repressed his emotions. I just think it's a real tragedy for human beings.
Karen?
We can't hear you, Karen, you're muted.
All right, I'm Karen Johnson and I live in Utah. And with regards to the triggers, I really appreciate how Isabella Wilkerson used stories as examples to help us understand how caste operates in this society. And a lot of these stories that she shared are indeed very heart-wrenching, like the little boy that Michelle talked about. That was just so heart-wrenching to me. And it reveals how even children aren't given, particularly Black children, aren't given the opportunity to be innocent, to be children, to be free of racial oppression or gender, free to not be prejudiced towards one another, right? And so, but to see for these people to not see his humanity and see him as a threat to their quote unquote white purity and to just brutally murder him, it was very, very heart-wrenching. And it speaks to their humanity, if you will, or lack thereof. And I also think about, like, on page 91, and where it talks about, I'm just gonna read this real quickly, if that's okay. 91, where it starts, was the second main paragraph, where it says, the town folks of East Texas village of Leesburg hammered a buggy axle in the ground to serve as a stake. Then they chained 19-year-old Willie McNeely to it. They collected the kindlings they would use for the fire at the base of his feet. Despite his protestations of innocence in connection to the white girl, they said he had assaulted. 500 people gathered that fall in 1921 to see Willie McNeely burned to death in front of them. And it's like, what kind of human beings could enact that kind of form of cruelty? And to think about Black people in this country and the anti-Black hatred continues in a variety of ways. Here, it was legal to do that. In today's age, we see that with the murder of Black men, women, and children by at the hands of officers, be it Tamir Rice or Alania Jones, 2 children who were killed, Breonna Taylor, Floyd, George Floyd, etc. To me, it's the same thing repackaged. The lack of not seeing the humanity of Black people and the anti-Black hatred that is part of the blood of this nation that we have to reckon with and deal with. All of those things are triggering to me.
Leonie? Thank you, Karen and Michelle.
Thank you. So I'm Leonie Smith. I'm based in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and this is my entry fee. The part that I would name as being a trigger, in addition to the 2 things that were, actually, I think I'll stick with that, even though it's a bit repetitive, but I'll speak to specifically how it showed up for me, is that I've made a point to not watch any of the videos. I haven't watched any of them in ever of the killings of people because I don't need to see that. And yet, even making that, and it's not out of avoidance, it's just because I understand. And so I don't, it's not informative for me. But one of the things that I recognize in terms of a trigger is the fact that, like, even through this book, and also, I don't know if any of you are watching the series Lovecraft Country that's happening on HBO, that in the space of reading this book and watching that series, I have several graphic tellings of stories that have come to me in this book. And I had a graphic visual of storytelling within that series when it spoke to both speaking to the murder of Emmett Till and actually recreating it with a white woman as the with a white woman in the series. And so that's what's triggering, is that there is not for me, it speaks to how prolific Black pain is, that even if one makes the choice to not participate in the viewing of videos on social media, that you cannot help your exposure to it because it's that pervasive. So that for me is the trigger, is the frequency and the frequency of violence against Black bodies. Complete.
Yeah, Nicole, you want to share? I don't know if you heard what we're doing, introductions and sharing of your personal experience going through this chapter.
Yeah. Hi everyone. I'm Nicole Wilson and I am joining from Houston, Texas. And yeah, it's so interesting to begin with that kind of statement that um, just allows us to voice, um, the trauma and those ways that reading these texts. Um, Not only can trigger, but also require, there's a psychic and emotional labor here as well. Um, but what stands out for me is that it just reinforces what I know and I understand. Like I love the archive. Um, I find archives to be a contemplative, spiritual place. But I also know there's sorrow in the archive. There's death. There's so much in the archive and here. And so in a way, and I shouldn't even say in a way, Wilkerson does recreate an archive here, and with each memento, with each artifact described, each giving voice to these narratives. There is it's just what I understand that we, Black people, and I'm talking about diasporic Blackness, that this is anti-Blackness has a global animus. And so there is, as Malcolm X said, we have no peace, there's no freedom. People can't be at peace unless they are free. And so it just reminds me of that.
Thank you, Nicole. Gio?
Hi guys, I'm joining you from Columbia, South Carolina, and here's my ticket for entry. Yeah, I think this whole chapter triggered me uh, with in various ways with the descriptions of some of these incidents I have seen and read of before. And it's always painful because you, in order not to be emotionally damaged by it, you have to kind of like distance yourself from it a bit, right? And look at it kind of clinically, as I do anyway, to analyze what in the hell was wrong with these people that they could enjoy this, you know, just dehumanize someone else so much that they could think of the worst thing that they could do to a person over the least infraction, something insignificant any place else in the world, perhaps, and then just inflict the worst damage that they could to create an atmosphere of fear and terror. Uh, and I think, wow, the two things that the postcards and the souvenirs were just so prolific that the postmaster general had to ban them. And so to get around that, oh, they just put them in, envelopes and just kept it rolling. Like, woohoo, what kind of demented creature, who professes some sort of Christianity, and all the tenets of, love thy neighbor except them. These are the, how can these two, polar entities exist in the same body? And, this is why I suppose we're still so dysfunctional at this point. And then the other one that stayed with me was the father of the young boy who had written the letter to the girl, right, innocently, at gunpoint, having to watch his son drown and not be able to jump in and save him. And I don't know if I could have made that choice. They'd have had to shoot me, I guess, but I don't know if he was the only child, right? So I guess the man was thinking about his wife. But oh my God, what that took out of a person. How could he look at his wife, in the face like the protector of her, because he had to stand there and allow his son to be drowned. And what was the boy thinking as he struggled against his bonds, looking at his father, you know, the person he admired most in the world, helpless, unable to save him.
Mhm.
And, you know, this is perhaps why this country is still in the place it is. The world is still in the place it is because you have to pay for this kind of stuff. You have to pay.
Mhm.
And that's, whew, that's it. That's all I got.
Thank you, Gio. We all can take a breath because all of this requires, because this is real time. Um, and I that's why I chose to do uh, the idea of getting getting through the triggers and getting them off before we even begin to try and struggle with this intellectually, because this is not about intellect in any way. Kim, can you share with us what your experiences were in reading this particular chapter? And I noticed that everyone was stopped in their tracks at the intro of the chapter.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Kim Brandon. Here is my ticket. And which chapter are we talking about? I'm sorry.
This is chapter 9, The Evil of Silence.
I think the thing that resonated most with me, and I'm hoping that this is the same chapter, was how you hear about this lynching and how white men are beating each other up to get to abuse and torture this Black body. They're actually fighting each other to get to the body and to get a souvenir. And that, when you look at that and look at the fact that they can then on their way home rape Black women and married women, young Black girls, that our bodies did not have any protection from them, and then you would kill a Black boy for writing a letter and not even be a suggestive letter. It just hurt me so badly to feel like when Michelle talks about being repressed, that here you have a married Black man and he can't protect his wife from white rape. What do you do with that? Where does that come out in your family? And so I think that this is the stuff that I think we of the diaspora have to heal, in terms of where did that go in our bodies and how did it pop out in our families that we were not able to protect each other.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. Thank you, Kim. Some great questions, and we'll get back to them. Venita, did you want to make some comments at all?
I won't be joining the discussion tonight. However, I will be your timekeeper for this evening.
Okay.
My name is Venita Walker, and I'm joining you from Cromwell, Connecticut. Welcome.
Cromwell. Ku Klux Klan land in Connecticut. I'm BJ Pete Graham, and this is I actually, I didn't know I had to have a ticket, but this is my ticket. And I am both sourcing the Kindle edition as well as the physical book. And I thought it was important about these triggers. Oh, and I'm coming to you from Boynton Beach, Florida, where if it's not 99 degrees, it's raining. And I thought it was important because we have all lived this. we have all lived through this, not only the evil, but the evil of the silence, the evil of people's humanity being robbed, and no one heard it, no one saw it, but they had to have souvenirs. And what that evidence does, what it has done generation after generation to people in a number of cultures, and how it has weaponized those things that are formed to protect and comfort us as humans, and made them into tools of terror and tools of undoing. You know, one of the things about this chapter that Isabel Wilkerson doesn't say it specifically, but she's talking about the undoing of God. If we believe that every man is anointed by the force of a higher force, and that belief has been weaponized, that is the undoing of the force, distorting and turning and reviewing and trying to bring a summary to the first part of this chapter. And I hope all of you have read it. When we go into her 8 pillars, we're talking about a construction crew. Who's in the construction crew? Who provides the material? Who does the paychecks and the payroll? And that's the way in which I have approached trying to read this. Otherwise, as Black women, we could lose our minds having so much information. The trigger for me in the evil of silence is that I grew up in the Southern Jim Crow. And I always say the deepest part of the Deep South. I grew up right here in Palm Beach County, Florida. My mother, and I'll talk about this later when we talk about the second chapter, the second pillar, divine will and laws of nature. But I had an uncle who was lynched. I had to grow up as a child being aware of the kind of terror. And when I was 6 years old or 7 years old, and I wasn't supposed to know, I came home to Jet magazine, and no one was home, so I brought in the mail. And there was this child, this boy, who looked my age in a coffin, and discover that children die. And he was Emmett Till. My mother used to tell me these stories, and I could never understand. Wait a minute, you say your father was one of the wealthiest Black men in America, and his son got lynched? How did that happen? And it wasn't until I was older and a young adult that understood why and how that happened. So let us move on beyond the evil of silence by me sharing what I think are the most important parts, takeaways from it. And that is that Wilkerson begins to build here a historical construction of human subjection, horror, and evil that established a hierarchical demonization of humans, embedding and reaching into the core of the Earth's very crust. permeating forces and consciousness of men and women for generations, distorting the very nature of humanity. Systems creating weaponized theologies, destroying faith, hope, and vision, creating a nothingness in the service of evil. And that's what this caste system does. It serves evil. And it's really interesting that when we go into the origins, what Wilkerson titles as the origins of our discontent, we have to ask the questions, well, how did this all start? She purports that it was at the time of human awareness, and I'm not sure I understand what that means, the time of human awareness. I mean, if the I think you'd have to be an anthropologist to understand. I don't know. I'm not sure that there were humans who didn't have an awareness about who they were. But anyway, we will go with her assumption that these things started there. So I'm going to ask the question, to what extent has the evolution of caste systems been empowered for the systemic foundations of evil that are presented in the book, that we acknowledge exist in our lifetimes? And we use history to understand the construction of how we got here in this subjection. So I just, in our experience, and Wilkerson doesn't go there. In our experience, we know that we accept that there are good and bad people. But in Wilkerson's assumptions, she is telling us that this started somewhere. It started at some place where somebody taught somebody something. And I want to ask you, what was that something? This awareness that somehow there were some things differently in this first pillar. The first pillar being that what she describes, the time of our discontent. What were we looking for? And she doesn't answer that. I think we have to mold that around in our heads and keep rolling it around. Any reason?
So the first pillar, divine will and the laws of nature, and how she references the Hindu, the Hindu text and the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think whenever this age of awareness was, that it's perfectly natural as a human being to be inquisitive about life. I mean, we come into this highly complex, stimulating, mysterious world. And I believe that has been true for every generation of human being.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's a perfectly natural question to ask ourselves, where do we come from? Why are we here?
I think it's interesting that she started off with ancient Hindu texts. Any other responses?
So she starts off, and I want to challenge this with regards to what she says on page 101. That's pillow number 1, the first paragraph. And she starts off by saying, before the age of human awareness, according to the ancient Hindu texts of India, Manu, the all-knowing, was seated in the contemplation when the great men approached him and asked him, Lord, please, Lord, tell us precisely in the proper order the laws of all the social classes, as well as those born in between. And so the part that I want to challenge is that we, be it the Hindu text or the Bible or the Quran, etc., these are texts that are created by human beings, if you will, who engage in a social construction of how they see other human beings. And so even though she says before the age of human awareness, there is the human awareness in that, because it is these human beings, these men in patriarchal societies who are constructing the other, who will be a part of the system of the upper class or upper caste or the elite, whatever, and those who will be subjugated to that. And so I have to argue that we have to challenge that notion that it comes from, that it is a divine will. No, it is us as human beings constructing how we're gonna subjugate other people.
Anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's human beings doing this. But if I think about ancient Africa and just the basic concept of kings and queens, to me is the beginning of a hierarchical construction of society. And and I can imagine, way back when lions and dinosaurs were dominating the earth, that, if I'm out there in the forest with you and you kick that dinosaur in the ass, then you got my respect.
I was thinking the same thing about patterns of the animal within the animal kingdom, especially during the prehistoric times, where there were some that flew, some that could run real fast, some that could go on mountains, and some were as big as mountains. And there were needs within that kingdom. And everybody had their needs, and everybody fought to have their needs met. So when you get, by the time, as Wilkerson calls it, the human awareness thing, I'm with you, Karen. I don't buy that. I don't think that there has ever been a human being on the face of this earth that hasn't had some kind of awareness of their needs. And demands. How are they going to eat? How are they going to have sex? How are they going to procreate? What do they need? How are they going to keep themselves warm? However that went. And I'm not an anthropologist, but it does make me very interested. So I think there's always been a model. So this human awareness, age of human awareness, I don't know what that is. And and I told Michelle earlier, sometimes I think she was writing, and she's like me. Sometimes I'll be talking and then I'll forget what I was talking about, and then I'll just stop. and I found that in this book a lot, where she would be, and you're looking into where is she going, and then it just stops, and you go, what happened? Yeah. Okay. Anybody else on this whole idea of what Karen has introduced about this whole notion of having an awareness and there was no particular era in which it happened, and at the divine will. The other question about the not divine will, is the notion of how I in my notes, which I'm having a hard time, it is by the kindness of the Brahmin
What page?
that other people eat. Did you get that? And I'm getting a sense, well, I got the sense, or I concluded, I don't know about you, and I want to hear about that, is that setting up the Lord, the word of the Lord. You know how we go to church and said, this is the word of the Lord, blah, 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 the day that he has made. Let us all be grateful. Is that at the point? And it was been translated into our lives. AME Catechism, the Catholic Church Catechism, the Baptist hymnal, has that particular part of Hindu text. Because the other, I don't know if you got confused, I got confused because I believe that the origin of all religion, of the most ancient religion, came out of Africa, which had to do with nature and the spirit of nature, and not about Brahim. Okay, everybody help me out here.
Well, the thing that I would say, like in response to this conversation, is that I just want to caution us, or just to invite that we're taking a look at this from our perspective and where we're sitting in now, and how that's shaping how it is that we view or understand what's been shared in terms of the text. So, for example, the idea of kings and queens, that, yeah, in the modern world, kings and queens are like untouchable. They're far removed from the people that they supposedly have authority over. Mm-hmm. But is that necessarily true of what used to exist? And I think when you read, one of the things I like to do is to read folktales from like around the world. And when you read like African folktales, or even novelized versions of African folktales, you did have your leaders, you did have your kings and your queens, and yet they were holding needs around the community, and they weren't untouchable. They weren't, they were people making decisions on behalf of a community, trying to make it whole and to take care of needs. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think that when we talk about where this kind of separation is coming from, it's to recognize that even though India is an older society, probably like 4,000 or 5,000 years old, it still is not the oldest society. And so therefore, I don't know what was happening in England, for example, for this kind of setup to happen, not in England, in India, for this kind of setup to happen. It seems like a setup that comes out of scarcity. And I don't associate scarcity with the African continent. I'm making up words now. So I would imagine that how leadership was held, how structure was held, that hierarchy did speak to differentiations in power, but I don't think that it was as strident or as divisive or as the spectrum was as wide as you in the on the African continent as you would see in other parts of the world. Because from what I've read, I mean, we have folk tales to tell us these things, and we have historians who are starting to tell us these things. Scarcity is not something that I certainly associate with the African continent, and I do associate it with parts of Asia. And I don't know enough about whether or not, if it's always in some way lacked abundance in some way for the amount of people there, and that's where this hierarchy and power came from. Because it does seem to me that there is a relationship between scarcity, or the perceived understanding of scarcity, and the perversion of power.
I'm wondering, Leonie, in response, if in Indian cultures, the whole notion of assignment, class assignment within the caste system, rather than scarcity, is a major factor.
Well, it could be. For me, I would want to go back. What sparks the class assignment? Like, I don't think so. I don't think that something needs to spark it. Nobody just wakes up and decides to put a hierarchy in place. Something, it's fed by something. And so, so that's where my mind goes.
Okay. One of the things I want you to ask you to do is, as we go through these chapters and these pillars, is to also flip back to the intro on evil of silence. I mean, the silence of evil. Okay. I wrote it down so many different ways. Help me out, y'all. The evil of silence.
Right the first time.
To the extent whether or not, as Leonie was talking about, the many tribal wars that went on in India, Australia, what we know of parts of the Caribbean, particularly in Haiti and Trinidad, little tribal wars. I mean, it's nothing like it. Nobody thought they were going to blow them up with nuclear bombs, but it really had to do who was going to benefit from the economy. Karen's holding up her hand.
Yes. So one thing when we look at the caste system in India, and Isabel Wilkerson talks about this a little bit later in the Pillows, but also history reveals that the caste system emerges through the invasion of a group of people who call themselves the Aryans. And so when we look at the caste system, we see that the caste system is tied to skin color, right? We do know that Africans, humanity emerges on the continent of Africa. And then from there, these early people out of the continent do leave the continent and move to various parts of the world, right? So humanity does come from that. And part of India also had been colonized by parts of Africa. So when these Aryans come in with the lighter skin, come in from parts of Europe into India, they establish a caste system, which is basically really a system. When you really look at the people who belong to various caste systems, you will find the darker skinned ones, the untouchables, etc., or the Dalits, are the most darkest ones, but that's because it's tied to a caste system that is tied to skin color. And Hinduism supports that foundation of it.
And you find that in the Caribbean too. in Jamaica, for instance, up until probably the last 20 years, you would find that you could almost identify economic classes by color.
Okay.
And we're talking about light-skinned Black people, brown Black people, bronze Black people, and then the people whose skin's the color of mine. And you would be able to identify. And that's true also in Trinidad and St. Kitts and Bombasi, not Bombasi,
Barbados.
Barbados, yes. And also Wilkerson also talks about how name association, names are assigned according to caste in India. And I'm wondering if that same thing went on in US chattel slavery, but we never recognized it because somebody told us something else was going on around names. For instance, you'll find more Smiths, Johnsons, Washingtons in the South, and more Whitterfords and other kinds of names as you go up the East Coast and toward the Midwest, because slaves were able to assign their own names, last names. So, because the plants after the plantation system started breaking down and going right before post-construction, there was a period where Blacks could give their children names that wasn't the plantation owner's name. But anyway, so let's move on to. Did anybody have any want to answer? Say anything? You know, the other thing
has something.
What? Kim? Okay.
Yes. I just wanted to add before we move on that when you open this chapter and it talks about before the age of human awareness, according to the ancient Hindu text. And I think that's the word that's key for me is the text. And that when you look at, the African languages, a lot of them are more spoken than written. And so when you have our griots telling us our language, I think it's a shortcut to say that this is where human awareness began, because it's always, no one wants to take the time and research to understand what was documented and written in Africa, or talk to the griots who generations and generations, you could talk to one person who could tell you 1,000 years of history. So I'm not so interested in the Hindu text as I am looking at all different types of text. But I think she needed the story to prove this point.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay.
That was just something that came to me.
Yeah. One of the things that she points out is that on page 103, she talks about how the hierarchy evolved in the New World on the basis of colorism. She does talk about that. So it's a very swift transition. But one of the questions that I had was going back to the evil of silence, is how with all of these texts, Leviticus and the Bible and the Torah and the Quran and all of these Hindu texts and globally, how we get to a translation where men and women allow their children to have ashes of incinerated bodies on their clothing.
You have to remember that most texts were not accessible to most people. I think we forget that most people didn't know how to read.
That's a
Like
good,
up until the last, like,
that's a good thing, because we also have to see that in contemporary times. When I say contemporary times, contemporary to me is 1863 all the way into 2020.
so it's kind of like what's happening right now. For me, it's not a mystery, because
Mhm,
what's happening right now is that the real information is known by people who are holding power and who are also invested in keeping most people ignorant.
mhm,
And so therefore, they engage in campaigns of misinformation. That's exactly what's happening right now.
mhm,
And it's the same thing. It's the same manifestation of how power keeps showing up, is that you would have these people who have access to the text, right? Like you think about whatever, like, like literacy is such a brand new thing. Like it's not even like 100 years old, like in terms of, for most people, for most classes in places that, say, for example, in English speaking countries.
mhm,
And so it's like, it means that the people who are invested in holding and perverting power can share misinformation. And because of how human beings view power, it's taken on as whole truth. So it's why someone like Donald Trump can be in the hospital for coronavirus and say, don't worry about it. And people will be like, okay, not going to worry about it.
mhm, mhm,
And why they won't read like a newspaper or read something from, the CDC or whatever. They won't go and seek information
mhm,
because they are so because we're so habituated to defer to
mhm.
power. And so power can easily corrupt the minds of everyday people.
So do you think, Leonie, that we have capitulated to the theologians who have translated uh, and dictated human awareness?
In my mind, that is the history of people in terms of access to information and also to theology. You
Mhm,
had to get it through the interpretation of somebody else, because you couldn't pick up a Bible and read it.
mhm,
It
mhm,
was impossible for you to do that.
mhm.
You
And
couldn't
do you
pick up a
think
Quran.
that's why the weapons have been so effective?
Hmm.
Mhm,
I mean, in any history or culture that you're in, once you increase people's access to knowledge, they access more individual power. That is a
ask
consistent.
everyone, after reading this particular chapter and the next chapter that we're going to talk about, divine will and laws of nature, and I'm going to go off script on my own questions. Here's a question. Uh, does Wilkerson expand your thinking about the difference between divine will and what's that thing, Michelle, in the AME thing? Not divine will. It's divine will and something else, some other kind of will. Self will. I haven't read it in such a long time, but it really means that every person. Gio, you know what I'm talking about. Y'all know, all y'all know what, but it's the ability for that God has given. Certain religions believe that God has given every individual the right to choose.
Talking free will?
Free will. Thank you. It's okay. So she doesn't talk about free will, but she talks about divine will. But she does insinuate that free will is really meaningless in a caste system.
Um, so when we look at the divine will versus free will, and particularly, I'm not going to talk about the caste system, but when I look at African American history during the time of slavery, one of the things that was important. So even though the enslavers on plantations or farms that had enslaved people, even though they used the Bible and
Mhm,
pulled out portions on passages that they would read to the enslaved and
mhm,
say, "You are by birth supposed to serve me and being served. So even those passages in Bibles were used as a way to brainwash and how the enslaved think that this is their, this is their fate, that they have to be enslaved. There were enslaved people who would use the Bible. So there's the enslaver brainwashing you with passages, thinking that you're supposed to be enslaved. But there were, in terms of getting to your point of free will, there were enslaved people who also looked at passages in the Bible that spoke to acts of resistance and liberation, and used those stories as stories that gave them hope, that gave them a guidepost to fight for their own liberation. And so you see that also history reveals that they use their free will to reinterpret the Bible to help them fight against their own oppression. Does that make sense? Is that
the part, is that some place in experiential place and historical place where people begin to break the silence of evil?
I think, yeah. So free will has to be a way to really critically look at your own lot of oppression. And for the most part, oppressed people do find ways to resist their oppression unless they're truly brainwashed. And so I think that is at that point when they have a level of awareness and reinterpreting their situation, or maybe using the Bible or whatever as a way to exercise their agency, because free will means that, right? Agency, their own self-agency to free themselves from their subjugation. Am I answering your question?
Yeah, and that's why you saw in the Nazi, I don't know how many of you have ever, done a lot of reading. I did a lot of reading about Nazi Germany and personal accounts. And I'm just a collector of books of slave narratives. So when you read the two, you wonder why in this laws of nature that there hasn't been a great deal of coordination of the people who have been subjected into this caste system. For instance, how does people who survive concentration camps now participate, or why, in the caste system?
That's a good point.
Why, for instance, I lived in a predominantly Jewish, very wealthy Jewish community for many years. And I started the Black Citizens of Brookline Association because that's just my nature, to begin to address some of the issues that my daughter was very, very small, but some of the issues that the Black teenagers in the town were bringing out. And I got many letters that said to me, niggas don't belong in Brookline, and your little monkeys ought to stay in the house, or something, stuff like that from Jewish people. And while people would like to tell us that a lot of Jewish people supported Black people in the civil rights movement, trying to move from subjugated citizens into full citizenship and agency in this country, and there weren't a lot. There just weren't a lot. I don't know where they got the thing. There weren't. The other is if you begin to talk, am I knocking the thing over? If you begin to talk to Jewish people about the African Holocaust, they will stop you and tell you that there was only one Holocaust, and it was the Jewish Holocaust.
But don't you get curious as to why? Like, to me, I can think of systemic reasons why that would happen. And so, like, I was actually in this conversation today with a Jewish person around who was in pain around, for example, what Jewish people in the Trump administration are willing to put up with in order to access power. And so we talked about how, like, you know, this is the act of becoming white, and this is what the impact is. And so I can imagine, for example, that the Jewish people who have suffered for a long time in different ways, but than people of African descent, but have significantly suffered for a long time, that in order to protect themselves, take on identities that give them protection.
But there's something else that, going back to and people, please interrupt me and tell me to shut up. But there's something I get so complicated in reading these books. That's why, you know, I need to watch. What's the name of that thing you were talking about on HBO?
A Handmaid's Tale. But let me interject one thought here. I'm going to read it to you. I saw a quote recently that was attributed to Septima Clark. And it says, we need to be taught to study rather than believe, to inquire rather than affirm. And, you know, and I think that really is the heart of it. You know, my family's religious, but not in a thoughtless sort of way. Both of my parents were very good about always asking me, and what do you think? You know, they would tell me what they believed, but they would ask me what I thought. And, you know, and I was always free to say whatever that was. And so I believe that is a really important tool in how we teach our children. And I think that a lot of people are not doing it, that they're teaching their children to just shut up and do as I say, and this is the way it is because this is the way it always was. And so if you take all of those fertile, foundational childhood years and you fill people up with a particular point of view, then, you know, it can take the rest of their life trying to undo that and trying to figure out how to think for themselves.
You really have brought us to this second pillar, the first being divine will and natural law. So now we're talking about heritability. And the question is, in terms, and whether or not we have entered into a pact of protectiveness in every generation, which acknowledges our existence. And that is why it appears sometimes that we engage in perpetuate the second pillar.
Yeah.
And so with inheriting a caste system, again, that is a way to justify a person's subjugation, right? If we tell you know, like she talks about in the book, and history also reveals that in this country, an enslaved child, if his mama was a slave, then he's born to slavery. And so it's just a way of justifying why you have to be subjugated in this way. And one thing I do want to say about the caste system in India is that those who are, let's say, I'm gonna use the Dalit caste because that's the lowest caste. If these, if individuals choose to not participate in the Hindu religion and become, let's say, converted to Catholicism or baptism or some other kind of religion, what that does is that frees them from being subjugated, because now they're no longer a part of a religion through inheritance or divine will that said you are the inferior other. And so being a Catholic or a Muslim or a Baptist, whatever, allows them to walk on another path that does not subjugate them to their social construction of the lower caste. And so then what that does is that reveals that this is all a social construction anyway, right?
Yeah.
People find ways to resist it. Is that making sense?
But I think that does it in the construction, but not in the reality, because it becomes embedded. You know, we always say race is a social construct.
Right.
But it is so embedded culturally as well as legally that it doesn't matter whether it was a social construct. It was constructed in the same way the caste system is constructed. What I found was interesting, and let us try to weave it into the hereditability, is the idea that people misunderstand class for caste. That people can escape class, but they can't escape caste. But I thought her example was a bad one, LeBron James, you know, I mean, I got confused on that example.
But they can escape caste when they free themselves of that Hindu religion. And so when they come out of it, when they're no longer Hindu, then they're not participating in the caste system. If they become Catholic or atheist, whatever, that's a way of escaping the caste system. But once you continue to stay in that Hindu religion, then you're participating in your own subjugation.
Yeah, but you know,
I'm coming to your class. You can have class online.
No, well, from a, you know, the educator's kind of point of view, the first 5 years being, you know, so important in a child's life. And so if you just take those 5 years and you instill in that, what is the biblical, train up a child in the way he should go, you know, and he shall never depart. You know, you just take those 5 years and drill a message into a kid, the likelihood of them deciding to leave Hinduism when they, or the AME church or anything else when they turn 18 is slim to none.
I do worry about how religion has been weaponized against oppressed people in general. And the consequences and the results, the outcomes for religions to continue to support a caste system as Isabel Wilkerson presents it. You know, if you go back to the section the evil, the evil of silence, it was a Christian theologian who she opens with, your silence will not your silence will not protect you. Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. But he was not systemic. Otherwise, he would never have been tortured. He would never have been assassinated by the Nazis. He would have been protected by the Christian infrastructure, the Christian church infrastructure. He was a resistor. And so these systems and I guess I'm reluctant. I have to lay back because I am of no religion. So I kind of have to lay back when I start and try to keep my mother from spinning around in her grave. But you can't help but think that major religions in this country, as the caste system was transferred into American life by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and all the laws that have been made since, have not been perpetuated. We're not designed to fulfill the purpose of the caste system that Isabel Wilkerson is pointing to in the Hindu text. Kim had her hand open.
I like your point, and I think the thing that comes to mind is when the Black church did work for civil rights in the 50s and the 60s, though the voice was silenced by them losing their tax status if they become political. So this whole system of caste shut down this one entry to power that the Black church had. And now Black churches will lose their tax status if they do anything that hints of being political. And I remember when Trayvon Martin was killed, and I went to church to be with people because I just thought, there would be a service about resilience and something, and it wasn't mentioned. It was not mentioned at all, and I had to get up and leave. But it is something that we have definitely lost, and because it was something that it wasn't even mourned that this was something that was taken from us, was this very, very, very powerful voice.
Kim, as you bring that up, I'm wondering, and maybe others have some thoughts about it, whether or not Trayvon Martin was portrayed in the media as a hip hopper. He smoked a little weed. He was not. Where was he in the cast? In the internal cast?
Well, I will say I went to during that time with Trayvon Martin, and I think the decision, I happened to be in New York City, and I went to Abyssina Baptist Church in Harlem and Calvin Butts preached a whole sermon.
Yeah,
and that's part of that Black liberation theology, that's important to us that continues today, that speaks to our conditions as subjugated people in this country, and tie it to, finding texts that help us understand our conditions and speak to how we engage in liberation. And so that particular Sunday that, Calvin Butts did definitely preach on that.
Oh, that's good to hear.
But I still wonder if, going back to hereditability, if we haven't absorbed, and Leonie, you look like you're getting like, I'm getting trouble here. If going back to hereditability, whether or not we have transferred and translated a caste system within our own community. And that's why resistors and non-resistors get so confused about what we're doing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think without question we have, the Greek organizations within the Black community, I think we thrive on, the silk stocking churches. We thrive on, and, for Black people, it has made some sense to me, even though I don't think it's a good thing. But from the perspective of people who have been treated so poorly, made to feel like they were less than dirt and whatnot, I think it's created a need to feel special in a lot of us. And so these internal caste systems in our community, I think speak to those kinds of unmet psychological needs.
But Wilkerson also clarifies.
To grow out of it.
Yeah. Wilkerson also clarifies, and I thought it was an important point that she made in talking about, wait a minute, I underscored it, that we have to, that as she writes, class is an altogether separate measure of one's standing in a society. And I mentioned this before, and Karen commented on it. And she says, if you can act your way out of it, then it is class, not caste. But I still think that there may be more, to your point, about caste in this country. How can you not acknowledge caste and look at our prisons?
Yeah.
And I think one of the most important parts of this book, and we're gonna move on, because how much time do we have?
But on that point, BJ, I want to say that I think that the way people do it is with blaming the victim, blaming the individual. I believe that this Western culture is really the death knell of Black people. But we've absorbed it, and we can point our fingers at other people who try to be white, but in our own ways, we have some of the same kinds of things going on. And I think that when you become a rabid individualist, and you begin to blame people who really are trapped by caste, that you have absorbed Western culture so thoroughly that you can no longer really be considered an asset within the Black community. And I'm thinking just now, the thing that you played, BJ, a couple of weeks ago, after the Black guy failed to get an indictment in the Brianna case, and you played the young woman, Tamika Mallory. Yeah, and she was saying to him, "You're no longer part of the Black community," That's what I'm saying. That I think that,
you're not one of
to the extent that you embrace this culture, then you've become something else, even though you still have dark skin.
But in your earlier comments, and Leonie, I'm gonna come to you in a minute. In your earlier comments, Michelle.
No, Leonie has to leave.
Yeah,
Bye,
sorry.
Leonie.
Oh, I thought you were
Bye.
holding up your hand. Leonie,
Sorry.
thank you. Thank you for
everybody.
your really tough comments, and you brought it at the timing was great.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody.
Michelle, I think you just answered something that was puzzling me as I've been reading this book. And usually I gobble up a book, but I had to go back and I think for me, you answered the question, why is Isabel Wilkerson writing this book? You just, I think you just captured it for me.
Okay.
What time did we go to 8 o'clock?
Now.
Yes, actually our time is up at 7:30.
Now,
Oh, okay.
but if people want to stay, if people want to stay a little longer, we can. If you have to go, Venita, it's okay.
Okay, well, I'm going to say good night to everyone. Enjoy
Good to
the
see
rest
you,
of the meeting.
Venita.
Nice to
Okay.
meet you.
Good
See you
night,
again.
Venita.
Have a nice night.
Good night, Venita.
Okay.
Good
Good night,
Thank
Leonie.
you.
Good night, Kim. Good night,
Good night,
Nicole, the
everybody.
co-host of the I Know Leonie's Born. Good night.
Good night.
I
Good
have
night
about
to you.
5 minutes and I'm going to have to head out too. So I'll do that quietly.
I just want to get to the question of, we've answered pretty much the 4 questions that I posed for this particular pillow hereditability, except for the question of when evil is inherited, can re-education resolve the urge to claim a position in the caste system? I mean, everybody, we always talk about a bucket of crabs or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the question, can re-education, I'm sorry, you're saying that
Can re-education resolve the urge of people claiming the caste system, their position in the caste system?
I'm optimistic enough to believe that it can, but I also believe that it is a long, hard road. And BJ and Karen, I don't know if you have heard me talk about the 500-year plan, but Kim always brings it up, but I'm gonna have to share it with you. And that is when I look at what white folks have done, it always seems to me that they have the long view of history, that they are planning decades and centuries ahead for how they're going to screw us over. And, we keep surviving despite the odds, we keep surviving. But I think if we're going to continue to survive, we have to develop a really long-term view of where we want to be and how we want to get there. So, for example, we're all frustrated that we only have 2 poor choices for the president. And I started voting for president in 1980, and that has been the case in every presidential election since 1980, at least. And it's going to continue to be the case because we can't wait until 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 8 months before an election to try to figure out how we're going to turn that particular dynamic around. And that's not what the Republicans have done. They are having orgasms over the fact that they're about to have a 6-3 majority on the Supreme Court. They have been working on that and working on that and working on that for a very long time. So I say 500 years because I know we can't control, what every generation is going to do for the next 500 years. But to get us to start really, I think, again, a part of this Western culture is the idea that everything happens like that. That's the bullshit that they put on us. Everything is supposed to happen like that. But in reality, we're involved in an evolutionary process. And so I'm just trying to get us to kind of think of it from that vantage. If we thought of ourselves as, I've got to pass the baton to the next generation, I've got to teach them what they know, what I know, so that they can take it to the next level and next level. And we've got this grandiose plan of where we want to be in 500 years. And this is what the people will be doing in year 2300. And this is what the people will be doing in 2400.
So is the caste system the impediment to that?
Yeah.
That's a big.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say one thing, which is a little off topic. I do not believe that evil is silent. I think that it is loud, and if you want to pretend that you don't hear it, you won't hear it. But it has never been silent. And I just think that the same way someone had mentioned earlier, the dust from people being incinerated was on children, that's not silent, that's a scream. And so I just think that what is it that makes us tone deaf to the evil? And evil people love it. They out there hooping and hollering and having barbecues at lynchings. So I just couldn't sit well thinking that if 15,000 people come to see a lynching and they are hollering and fighting each other to get to the body, and then they're sending these postcards out, that's not silent. Evil got a big ass mouth and it's always open.
And orange hair.
I think that the silence that's being referred to is that people choose to live with it rather than resist it, rather than protest, rather than speak out. And I think it's brilliant of most authors who write about this stuff is to not be critical of the way in which people do that, and not be blind to the notion that fear has an element of freeze.
I guess all I'm saying is that for the oppressed people, we may have a level of silence that there's a level of safety in it. But I just think that when you read this book and you talk about that racism equals hate, and that's what I read in this chapter, racism equals hate. And so here we are trying to wake up all of these people who get pleasure out of hating you. They are not silent. They are they are getting what they want out of this situation. And there's this feeling of we have to wake up the silent majority.
But I think she's also asking the question, Kim. I think she's asking the questions of the people who are silent about it, also evil.
Yes, and they're making noise, and I don't think they're silent. I don't think they're silent.
Yeah.
I don't think they're silent, because if there's an opportunity for them to get a job and me to get a job, all of a sudden their mouth is going to open so wide to say, not her, me. So I know this is maybe semantics and we're just kind of going over this, but I really think that I need to give up on this thought of we need to wake people up. If you see George Floyd, somebody killing him on a film, and it doesn't resonate with you, it's not because you're silent, it's because you are complicit and you are with the program.
And
that is
I
not
think that's what was illustrated in what she presented in the introduction to this chapter, that acquiescence is and heritability is present when you allow your children to have the ashes of bones in the air where they're playing and you say nothing.
Right.
You know, the other is, acknowledging the fear. And we acknowledge it in many ways. For instance, I was mad for many years because Black people were still shopping at Walmart, that they were still going to Red Lobster, because we knew.
And Wendy's.
Yeah, and that whole list of Alec, people who were plotting, genuinely financing the plotting of the removal of Black people from this society. And we were still shopping at those places. We were, it got me into a whole nother thing about shopping for it's still so
Yeah, but BJ, I think if you're not plugged in, if you're not politically aware, you might not even know what Alec is.
Right.
But I'm thinking about that scene with Henry Fonda as a little boy.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no way that he could not see what was going on. There was no way that his father could not see what was going on.
I agree.
And the only thing that disappointed me about that scene was that they drove home in silence. And I wish that his father had used that opportunity to help him process that, to have some conversation about that.
Well, even as an adult, he didn't become a superhero activist of any kind. He didn't write a book. He could have hired somebody to write a book to tell that story. A lot of things that he could have done. And I wondered why she chose him. Maybe because she just knew it. I don't know. But
but it may be that his father didn't help him process it, so he saw it and it stayed somewhere in his head, but not to the point that it turned into activism. Good night, Kim. Thank you.
Good night, Kim. Good to see you.
Thank you, BJ.
See you next week. You're welcome. But here is the whole question of man's inhumanity to man, and who gets to recognize it.
Logging off.
Bye, Karen.
Bye, Karen.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
I'm glad you did.
See you next week.
We'll see you next week.
All right.
Okay.
I haven't been on Facebook. I'm with the sleeping problems. I'm thinking maybe it's Facebook or something. I don't know. So.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Have a good evening. But here's what I'm saying. The whole notion of man's inhumanity to man. I wasn't feeling the Henry Ford story. At first I thought she was going to talk about the Ford Motor Company. And, I just...
Who was caught up in eugenics?
Yeah. But, he had claimed, and his positioning in the caste system that he recognized, and if he didn't recognize, he could have paid somebody to explain it to him.
Yeah.
How much money?
Gio is the one, BJ, that if you don't pull her into the conversation, She will be as quiet as a mouse.
Well, I'm
So
about to ask.
Oh no, no, it was noisy here. My people were being quite noisy, so I kept myself on mute. Every time I wanted to say something, they were "Wah, wah, wah." But okay. But no,
I
going back to
think
your
a real good thing for to ask Gio to start up a conversation about is this whole notion about whether or not endogyny has been perpetrated in this society by governmental regulations. We're always talking about it, but I think most people who say it, oh, that's how they got rid of the black father, that's how they got rid of this and that and the other. But more than destruction, I think more than destruction of the family is the hopelessness and helplessness that comes out of recognizing that you're in a caste system.
yes, that's absolutely true. Mm. Well, I'm going to kind of link that to your earlier question about uh, re-education.
Hmm.
And so, even if um, they are able to take advantage of the information and educational resources to even recognize that they are part of this constructed system that keeps them in their place,
Hmm.
there has to be some type of reward to motivate them to fight against it, to want to move, to even ask questions about it. But as long as each person in their tier is comfortable there, they can be silent in the face of the evils that are perpetrated on other people and do nothing. And then you have the groups who have the information but still are unwilling to jeopardize that bit of power that they think they have within their level of the caste system to attempt to change. It seems, I mean, the whole narrative around the caste system here in America, when you start to dig into it, it becomes so enormous, right? There's so many moving parts that reinforce the next part that keep you down, right? What you're taught, the source of the textbooks that you're allowed to read and study, and you're accredited with that knowledge, right? If you're searching, reaching for a degree in whatever area, and then there's the religion that you choose or not choose, that because you want to belong. It's a human desire to belong to a group. Very few of us are perfectly happy existing on our own, right? Those free spirits who kind of can resist these outside forces. Uh, you've got the uh, uh, the pressure to be involved with nationalism, right? Who are we? You're an American citizen, and so there's this idea of patriotism and what that means. Is that the way that I can express myself and be accepted, no matter what level I'm on? And then there's the politics. You want to belong to one group because something in their dogma, touches you and makes you feel like I could have power if I believe if I follow along with what they're saying, whether it's real or not. And I think it comes back down to, this whole thing it's an illusion. And to cut through it is the struggle, because it ingrained in you, are all these things that have pulled at you and put little pieces of information in you, like a computer or a mechanism, a machine. They're part of you. They put this gear into you, the religious gear. Oh, if I don't, I believe in one creator and he looks like this or she looks like that, and they've graced, this certain group, above the rest, and this is what I have to do to belong in that. And then there's your other gear in there, that cog, and that's your family structure, right? and their belief system that's been put into you, and you don't want to be ostracized from your family, so you have to go along with what they're saying and doing, or their politics. And so it's all about, do you want to they make you choose. Do you want to be able to function in this society that we've created on the level we've chosen to put you on? Or are you going to go against it and be called a radical, or fall into Antifa, or some other made up term or classification that they've put you into to put you in your place? It's about keeping you in your place. I mean, the whole idea of the education system is to keep the worker working, not to give you knowledge, not to give you self-awareness, but to keep you working in the system that provides the fuel for this hyper capitalistic world that we're in. And if you have time, right, or a choice not to have to go to that factory, not to have to go to that supermarket and be the cashier, because you have already, what you need to survive. Your home is provided, your health care is provided, your children are going to a good school. If you have that access, why would you go work all those, in inclement weather, or in conditions, or accept sexual harassment at work and all these other things that they put upon the worker? It's about those people who control everything and want to keep that control, and the rest of us who they're just, letting us pretend that we have some kind of control. So it's really a mental and spiritual mishmash, a disconnect, because you know deeply inside of you that there is something inherently wrong with this whole thing. They tell me I can be president, but no, I can't. Okay. They tell me I could be the CEO of this company, but there's so much red tape to get through there and get the government contracts, and then more and more and more. And then if I get it, I have to feel some kind of way, because now they said, oh, you got it because you were a Black woman, or some other minority or some other reason, not because you worked hard, because that's what you had, that was your ideal. And you had the time and the resources to put all of your energy into that. But I
Or
forgot
the
where I was
bar.
going.
You
Hmm.
missed the part where they just moved the bar up.
Oh yeah, yeah,
We
that's
have,
right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead and
No,
talk
no, no,
about
no,
it.
no. You got my brain moving here. Mm,
Yeah.
Let me ask you about, of all the things that you outlined, are people making decisions in the interest of the caste system?
Oh, if they feel comfortable in their tier, yes, they will. And there are all these other outside pressures that you must conform,
Yeah,
because the nonconformists end up in prison.
yeah.
Okay.
Because I always felt like it was very interesting that Jesse Jackson, who I will say was not as smooth as Barack Obama, and that the time was different, but they chose Barack Obama in my mind because he had some of the things that Jesse Jackson didn't have, around pedigree, around color, around whiteness, because his grandparents and his mother was white, that they could lean on without acknowledging what they needed at the time was his brilliance. That wasn't the formula that they operated within. It was his utility. So I don't know. I don't know if, as I move on, I'm back to page 300 and something, and I'm not sure if Wilkerson is going to convince me that something other than the biblical, the religious texts fuel this caste system. You know, it's like the souvenirs and the postcards, and we keep going back to them. I had heard about them, and one time I heard my parents talking about it, and it was in relationship to someone who I knew who had been burned alive, lynched, and I'm not sure if, as much as that evil didn't have the postcards and the souvenirs, that it was more about around feeding the hate and evil, but it was also around trying to move from the place where the people who participated in that, in the caste system, to a higher level. And them not understanding that they too were captured in the caste system.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You know, Stephen always, he and I read a lot of books together, and he always tells me that, asks me, why you read the book if you're going to rewrite the book? Because it's easier and I have more time for it.
Okay.
But I think we all have some expectations. And I don't think she spent enough time on the research. I don't know, maybe because she was trying not to put it in a timeline, the pillars in a timeline.
Mm-hmm.
That could be.
But it was real clear. She lived in the United States, and she was talking about the United States in her time. I mean, in her contemporary time, and I think of United States contemporary time, 1863, to today's date. That's how I think about it.
This book has kind of made me curious about caste systems in other societies. So she studied the U.S., Germany, and India. But we know that this plays out, you know, in similar ways in so many other places. But it may be fair to focus on the U.S. if we are like, you know.
But you know, one of the things she didn't, you know, for instance, and you know, I was a student of U.S. businesses, the history of U.S. businesses, and she didn't, for instance, the American Wool Company, that happened to be in Andover, Massachusetts. When they built their manufacturing processing plant in Andover, they built a whole community where the managers lived in the 2-story brick houses. The supervisors lived in the 1-story brick house. And the other workers lived, which is how in Massachusetts, this whole notion of 2 and 3 family houses got started because the Wilson Wool Company had the first design, and the workers lived in the first, second, in the 3 family houses, and the people who were the executives, they had these huge single family houses that were kind of like mansions, which is why Andover has so many so much housing like that. And so when you work for the company, you were assigned within the caste.
I saw a similar pattern when I visited my son
in Germany.
On the army base, yeah.
The military has always had a caste system. I did my internship work when I was in business school. I spent 6 months at Mercedes-Benz, and I was in Berlin. And then I spent a lot of time running from Berlin to Belgium, and those companies continue to have a caste system where you even get paid differently. Not differently in the sense of like the executives get paid monthly, the middle management gets paid every 2 weeks, and the workers get paid every week. I mean, it's that distinct. And this was back in 1970.
Yeah.
And every person at Mercedes who was an executive or a senior management got a car. But according to your rank, you got a different car. Yeah. So and we had like the Wilson American Wilson Wool Company, companies all over this country like that where the whole town was really the company town, especially in upstate New York and Connecticut and Massachusetts, where manufacturing was really happening. And they weren't picking cotton.
But yeah, I think there has to be just something maybe innate in human beings that allows us to participate in these kinds of systems. We want that special recognition, you know.
I don't know. I think maybe it's because the outcomes and the rewards. It may be a system of reward as much as anything else. I just, you know, we didn't talk about coming out of Europe, the whole night, especially Italy, where Southern Italians are seen as less than and more than Northern Italians, and it all has to do with hair coloring and color, complexion. But that came out of the history of intermarriage and who is purer. I mean, it's, you know, where the Northern Italians were marrying Spaniards. It's just, and this thing is global.
It's deep stuff. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, white women, European women, when coming to the United States, what was the first thing they did if they had dark hair? They colored it blonde.
Yes.
My friend,
It's true.
I'm not going to call his name, but a white friend of mine, a guy, was telling me a few years ago that all of the white girls in New York City, for their 16th birthday present, they're getting a nice pointy nose.
Yeah, that was a thing.
Well, no. That is what, when I went to school, that is what the rich white girls did at Christmas in freshman year.
At
They went
Christmas.
back to New York City so they could get their nose jobs.
Yes.
You know, there's some deep stuff going on, deep stuff. But we're not going to figure it all out tonight,
I
DJ.
know. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank
Yes,
you.
thank you for these very deep probing questions.
Yeah.
Well, I hope it carries us forward in the book.
Yeah.
Because I found that I just had to do some walking around, and I don't go walking like down the street. I lived in a gated community. I don't trust these people.
Oh no.
Oh no.
Oh my goodness.
I haven't been living here 2 years yet, and nobody knows the South like I know the South. I went to high school and college, and when I was in high school for 3 years, I was the only one there.
Oh.
Does it seem to you, I mean, I know you haven't been able to get out so much because of COVID, but does it seem to you like it's a new South? Do you see the
Well, I don't
progress?
think it's the New South in the sense that race relations has liberated Black people. I think it's a New South because what is striking to me is, you know, I left here when I graduated from high school, so yeah, you probably asking the wrong person. But anyway, is that a class system has been created, and Black people who fit a certain profile, they don't have to worry about the Ku Klux Klan or the sheriff's boys or any of that stuff. Like, I got really nervous the other day, and I told Stephen about answering a damn telephone when you don't know who it is. And it was the Sheriff's Association, and I was on another call on my cell phone, and I'm trying to tell the man I have to call you back, but they were soliciting for the sheriff's department. And I told Stephen, I said, if you don't give them money, they know your name, your where you live, your tag number, your license number, and all that stuff. He's not getting it about the South, which is why he goes to Boston all the time. Now he's stuck in Boston.
Oh goodness. No.
You know, his head is just stuck in Boston because he grew up in Boston, you know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I hear that there is a reverse migration going on from the Great Migration.
Oh
that,
yeah.
That more and more Blacks are coming back to the South, you know, these days.
I don't think this far down. Florida is a very different kind of place. I think North Carolina, South Carolina, the Carolinas, Maryland, Texas, but there's a lot at play here. Because there was such great suppression social and political suppression. Now there's a whole thing of Black people participating at a great price, whatever the price is. And to me, that's not liberation. That's something else. That's another subjection. And you know, I started doing. I was living in Boston, and my dad got ill, and my mother had died, and I came down here to take care of my father. And Tara was in middle school. It just started middle school, and she was doing so well. So we stayed down here for a couple of years, and that's when I started doing radio because nobody would give me a job. So, I could repeat every radio show I did here for 5 years.
Wow.
Wow.
And they would be relevant.
Wow. That says a lot.
So they haven't, the Palm Beach Post hasn't run an editorial about she's back. When I left, they did run editorials about I was leaving.
Wow. Goodness. You made an impression, huh? No.
I know. Yeah. I told you that lady in that letter sent me that letter about Joshua Johnson. Joshua Johnson's mother. She told me, she said, and I knew that. Judge Rogers used to tell me that all the time. He says, I walked down the corridor to the courtroom and the county commission building, county building, and you know you near a Black person because I can hear your mouth on their radio at their desk.
Okay.
But it's the same, and it makes me so sad. There are people who were part of my posse, people who really, really supported me and the stuff I was trying to do on radio. And community radio is a lot easier to organize people around specific kinds of issues. And they're still not doing anything. And it makes me really sad. Yeah.
All right. On that note,
okay. Thank you for having me. And I enjoyed it.
All right, we're gonna see you next week.
Yes, I got Alexa knows how to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
She reminded me first thing this morning.
Okay.
And give us a quick commercial about OCG and Alpha.
Let me give you a quick commercial.
Tell us about it.
Oh, okay. The Alpha Show airs live and call in on Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. on TruthWorks Network, which is the Black Voice Collaborative. And we are currently recruiting hosts to address specific issues. One of them has to do with our program for Black women and our program for Black people who working while Black and Black women in the prison. Our Common Ground has been broadcasting live and call-in since 1985, and we broadcast each Saturday night at 10 p.m. at Blog Talk Radio, Our Common Ground, OCG, and we are live and call-in. We say that what we do is we educate, we inform, so that we can transfer truth to power every time we broadcast.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I would add, I have been listening to Our Common Ground for about 10 years. And one of the things that I think this program excels at is BJ knows everybody. She knows everybody who's anybody. And so if you just want to sit back and listen to some really high level intellectual kind of stimulation, she brings on a lot of scholars and well-known people. Then it's a great place on Saturday night to get that kind of reflection. And I enjoy it because I hate being led around by mass media. You know, they get one or two stories and they wear the hell out of them as if there's nothing else going on in the world. And I know that's not true. Mm-hmm. And so BJ takes us to some of those other really important things.
Well, you know, I've been having conversations. Right. Thank you so much, El Michelle. I've been having conversations with people. There was a time where, I mean, I've interviewed, there is not a Black scholar, academician, or thinker in our time that I have not interviewed. Some of them are dead. A lot of them are dead. And part of that had to do with the collaborative nature of the caliber of community radio hosts. Mm-hmm. Bob Law, Melanie, can't think of her name now. Some of them are dead. Where we would, when you had to pay for a long distance phone call, there was no email. There wasn't even, you were unique if you had a fax machine. And we collaborated about what was important for Black people to be exposed to know and understand. And in the Black political agenda, how we could prioritize nationally. I mean, a good example was that 2 days before Nelson Mandela was released from prison, Winnie Mandela was talking to me at 10 o'clock, talking to Joe Madison at 11 o'clock, talking to Bob Law the night before. I mean, we organized all of it in that way. So part of the problem now is the Black thinkers, you know, and I have to give it to some of the people that I have met that I did not know, like, you know, Tommy Curry and Pascal Robert, who is just, he's brilliant, but he can't get it together. And I don't know why he can't write. And then we were also collaborating on who could ruin it for Black people. I mean, you probably noticed that there's some, you know, some people are cut because they are not serving Black people well. They are wasting our resources or something like that. Anyway, so the other is that Black authors had nowhere else to go. There was no MSNBC, and NBC wasn't asking them to come on and talk about their book. C-SPAN book thing didn't even exist. there were no places and spaces other than universities and the NAACP and the Urban League for them to go to sell their books.
Yeah. And what I call myself doing here, BJ, is creating a space where regular people, not scholars, what I call everyday people, can have a space to reflect on all of these big issues, because I feel like as parents, she who rocks the cradle, rules the world. And so to me, if everyday people don't understand at a visceral kind of level what intellectuals are talking about on this high scale level, then we never make the connection. And so I hope that what we're doing in this book group is talking about things in a very down-to-earth way that anybody can understand, and leaving an archive that maybe in 2300 Black folks will be wondering, well, is the only thing they talked about was the Kardashians? Was anybody talking about anything else? But they can find our archives and know, we've been struggling. Just like you said, you could write, you could go back to your same radio program because the issues haven't changed.
Except for the whole notion, and it goes to this book, it really does, and it just struck me when you were talking, El Michelle, that when I literally had a 1-month campaign when rap music started hitting Black radio stations. To somebody or another was sending me threats to the radio station, left dead birds on my sidewalk in front of my door at home.
Wow.
And I went to a reception they were having and confronted them, which started the war, I guess. But anyway, I was young and stupid, Gio. Don't laugh.
Okay.
I went all the way to Miami and I harassed them.
Wow. Okay. You get OG on the back of your shirt. No.
So, I mean, I come out of the Black Panther Party. And I knew that I was stronger than they were. They were just a bunch of Two Live Crew. That's the name of them. I knew there was just a bunch of punks who figured out how to exploit Black people. So anyway, you could go all the way back in the archives. And everything that Dolores, give me the name, Dolores Tucker, when she confronted the rappers back in 1986, 86 or 87, we were predicting the future. Yeah. And radio stations didn't have budgets and stuff like that. Shoot, when I went to the Anita Hill hearing, Charles Ogletree told me, if you can get to DC, you can get to DC, I'll get you in. But I ain't got no money to bring you to DC. So, you know, it has its history. And some people made certain decisions. I always, the big jobs, I always turn them down because I wasn't going to do Our Common Ground once a week because that's not what I did. I did community radio. And then when the community radio stations went away, I had to make some choices about what I was going to do. And when I first came on the internet, I was doing Our Common Ground Monday through Friday, every night at 10 o'clock. But I also had a job, you know, and so I had to make the choice. I either do it once a week or not do it at all. And a lot of people who have kept a lot of communities on course have had to make that decision. I wasn't the only one. But when Kathy Hughes, who y'all give all the awards to, you know I'm gonna go on that one. I wrote a business plan. And because everybody else, the only thing they knew was radio, except for Bob Law used to teach. I wrote a business plan. I kept people that I knew were traitors out of it. Joe Madison was one of them. I wouldn't share it with Joe because Joe was, you know, but I did talk to, at the time, the mayor, Marion Barry. And Marion said to me, if you're going to be successful in this, you've got to have Kathy Hughes on board. And what it was all these white people who own these individual little stations here, there, and everywhere, all through the South and the Southwest, you buy them up because the people that own the station where I was, they want to sell me their station. But you can't make money with one radio station. There is no way in hell you can ever make enough money to pay anybody with one radio station. So I put together this business plan and suggested to 6 radio show hosts, let's all get together. We can figure out the funding, we can figure out the financing, but let's get together and let's buy 132 radio stations. They're all community stations, and these white folks want out of this stuff because they're not making any money with these little radio stations, taking ads from the local church and the local Y and stuff like that. So I put together the plan. We had 3 or 4 phone conferences. Still during the time where there was no email, you had to pay for long distance calls. And so I went to New York. I talked to the satellite people because you had to have a satellite. You had to lease a satellite beam so that my show could go into a station in Iowa or Tennessee or Louisiana. Bob's show could go in, and what we had planned on doing was all of our shows would go live on all of those stations. And then we fill it in with community stuff that Black radio stations always did. I mean, my daughter all through junior high school had a radio show on Saturday morning, a teen radio show, even though she wasn't even a teen, but anyway.
That's cool. That's okay. That's cool.
Yeah.
Are you writing your biography? Because that sounds like it could be a movie.
Let me get through the summary of the book.
Okay, BJ.
So anyway, what does Kathy Hughes do? She
So
took
your
the
idea?
plan.
Oh
Huh?
She moved
no.
to Clear Channel.
Mm-hmm.
Clear Channel. She's always already in debt at WOL. So Clear Channel says, "Oh yeah, we'll rewrite your debt to us, your loan, and include this. We're only talking about maybe $5 or $6 more million. Then you could pay your she was in so much debt. On top of she had a lot of personal debt because she was buying Gucci bags and all that shit. But anyway, and so Clear Channel did it. She was in it for less than 2 years. And then Clear Channel took all those stations and turned them into what? Right wing evangelical. Rush
Wow.
Limbaugh and Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson and some more cretins and monsters.
Wow.
Because she couldn't pay those people back.
Mm.
And mind you, she had gotten the minority station discount.
Mm.
Wow.
So when Clear Channel took it from her, they took it at a discount that was something like 36% discount than if they had just gone on the market to buy them.
Ooh.
But
Wow.
you know, we wouldn't have been able to do it otherwise. But I just kept telling them, I don't trust Kathy Hughes. She got too much debt. I did the research. I said she unless she does something and she does something real quick, she's gonna lose WOL. And she did something real quick. She even like just changed the names in my business plan because somebody got a copy of it, her first submittal to Clear Channel. It's almost like they copied it on a copy machine with some whiteout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So
And
you,
that just when I talk about the 500-year plan, what I'm really talking about is how not to get myself so crazy with the thought that we've got to solve this problem right now. Because our shit is deep. You know, our shit is deep. You know, one of my other group names is Revolutionary Love Leadership Series, BJ. And I hope that
that's
you,
how I got confused.
I hope that you, sister wife, and my brother, our brother husband.
Is he in this group?
No, he's not in this group, but he did promise me years ago that he was going to read Salvation, Black People in Love.
Yeah.
Bell Hooks' book with me. So I would love for the three of us to do that. You too, Gio.
But you know what you do is
because if we don't figure out how to treat each other, if we can't get past that hurdle, nothing else is possible.
But you know, the thing is that one of the things that's starting to worry me, I don't have much time. And I've been trying to figure out what are gonna be the priorities. And you know, I've been doing this since I was like 16 years old. I joined the Black Panther Party when I was 16. That's because I went to college early. Don't be laughing, Gio.
No. It just reminds me of my sister because she was in the Black Youth Organization when she was a teenager. So yeah, I know.
I was 15 when I went off to college. But see,
Wow.
that's part of this whole class system. You think I would send a 15-year-old all the way to Boston, yeah, to go to college? No.
Right,
Oh,
right, right.
But Black people during that time, they were grateful for opportunity for their children.
mhm.
You know, I don't blame my parents. I mean, my parents were grateful and thought it was special because they were on a mission, but they were just
Yeah.
happened to be on the wrong mission, and that was to show white people that we are worthy. You know, I wouldn't have never been on a mission to show white people nothing, you know. but but that's how it changed generation to generation. Now we're in a generation where they don't give a shit. They
Right.
just them damn whatever, whoever, whatever you think, they think, they don't give a shit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And that is defeating as well. That
yeah,
is as defeating as generation after generation trying to earn the respect and honor that is divinely given,
yeah.
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah, did you all watch the town hall last night with Joe Biden?
No,
No.
Oh, well, then I'm not
no,
going to talk to you about it.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't, the thing is that I, Joe Biden, I just, you know, Joe,
He's the best we got, BJ.
I know, I know, and I mourn the fact. I mourn the fact.
Yeah.
I just decided I'm not listening to that stuff.
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
already voted, and I did my neighborhood thing. They send you a thing to call people, and I did my 10 people, and I'm doing our common ground, and I just can't hope for more. Joe
Yeah.
Biden, by any stretch of the imagination, won't be as bad as Donald Trump. By any
That's true.
stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
That's true.
There was a young Black woman on the program last night who in the audience
uh,
who asked one of the pre-selected questions. And she was saying that, I mean, I don't know how old she was, maybe 20. And she was saying that, this was her first time experiencing the things that we're dealing with in this country. And so she wanted to know how Joe would deal with white supremacy. He didn't give a particularly good answer.
I know.
But my heart went out to her because that's my concern, BJ, that a lot of the young people who have never seen this, don't really understand the depth of evil that we're dealing with here.
Yes.
But here's an adult. And I think that the word is not never experienced, never recognized. I just didn't know what it was. I just didn't see it in full cinematic panorama in the way that I see it now.
Yes.
Because it was undercover.
White man. Sometimes I just want to punch Black people in the face. Jesus Christ. To ask a white man who has been the Vice President of the United States of America under a Black man. Why are you even there at that forum with that stupid question? He's not going to do anything. I don't know, maybe she got paid to ask that question. And maybe she got paid to say that. But I've been trying to be more, what do you call it? Graceful, as my mother used to say.
Okay.
My sister called me. The night I was cussing at the man on my sister called me. You can't talk to our people like that on the radio. I said, my motherfucking show. What are you talking about?
Oh my goodness. Is that what happened last week?
Yeah, it's her show, but you can't. I said, look, I had to tell her the reason why you are so unhappy is because you're constipated on your own imprisonment.
Oh.
Don't tell me what I can't do. Oh my
Okay.
God. I mean, it started where, and she grew up and hear from her for 2 days.
Probably a good idea.
But here's the thing. I think that people confuse self-determination with kindness. Self-actualization, not determination. Self-actualization with kindness. They think you can't have both, or you have to give up one for the other, or you even have to have one of them. So I don't know, I would have been so upset. That's why I didn't watch the thing last night. I knew that would have had me.
I understand.
Had me really, really crazy. But
all right, ladies.
I have really enjoyed this. We have to do this more.
Absolutely. I'm gonna stop the recording.
Okay.